Corrupt Authority by yours truly. Arkeda swallowed, then picked up as if he hadn't been interrupted. We suspected for a while that Sylph was planning to make illegal and unregistered Master Balls to sell on the black market to bitter trainers affected by G.R.I.P's new policies on Pokemon training. The timing would have been just right, but we couldn't find any incriminating evidence against this corporation even when Ms. Saishi tipped us off. Therefore, we had no warrant for storming and taking the building, so she agreed to feed information to one of our inspection teams when they were still inside the building so that we'd have grounds for making arrests. In return, however, we had to offer her protection so that her fellows wouldn't kill her before we could get her out of the building. That's where you come in, Kenta. Your rank isn't that great since you haven't been with the Force long, but the records reveal your prestige as a Pokemon trainer. You and Lieutenant Shin were to be led blindly into Ms. Saishi's presence, so that you could escort her back out of the building when she freed you again. Arkeda lowered his head in apology. We couldn't tell you, or you might not have acted your part right. I hope you will forgive me for being secretive. It was for a good cause. Kenta didn't know how he took it all in. He felt he shouldn't have been able to swallow Arkeda's words. Who could have accepted such an explanation so willingly? Someone who's been suspicious of his government all along, that's who. This isn't shocking news, it's goddamn vindication. Captain, he said slowly, angrily through his teeth. No offense, but you'd make a horrendous Pokemon trainer. He glared at his commanding officer. Do you have any idea how alone I felt back there? A good team doesn't keep secrets. They think and act as one. When there's victory, the joy is shared amongst all. When there's terror, every team player shudders together. And when there's pain, not one member is numb to the agony. He pointed insistently to himself. I joined this force because Silhouette was the most honest professional organization I could think of. I thought we were an absolute good in Japan. But how can I think that now? He turned his glare to Saishi. When you just casually brushed off the fact that this woman was going to murder me. Arkeda sighed and closed his eyes, then shook his head wearily. Reaching behind him, he pulled out his pistol and clicked it into the loaded position. You're too naive, he said softly, then pointed the gun at Kenta's leg. Now, he bellowed, with much more force than before. Enough with this insubordination! Stand down and deliver the Master Ball. This is an order, Sergeant Nina! Kenta looked at him miserably, feeling betrayed, but not freshly betrayed. I suppose you're not going to admit you want the Master Ball for your own power either, he murmured, turning away from his captain. One way or another, you'll have it for yourselves. He tensed his body. But I won't be the one to give it to you! Barely understanding what he was doing, moving on pure instinct, Kenta tore off down the alley for the bushes at the end. Behind him, he heard a scream of fury from Saishi. No! My Master Ball! I won't let you get away! Then he heard a gunshot, and his mind registered excruciating pain in both his lower back and his stomach on the right side of his body. Falling forward, but unable to do anything about it for shock, his upper torso crashed through the branches and leaves on the bushes, while his legs and feet remained visible on the outside. As his blood began to pool out from under the bush's leaves, Arkeda and Saishi looked at each other in horror. You shot him. It had to be done. What if he's dead? Then one of the Sylph executives killed him. Hey, look at that! Bolt blasted out of the bushes at the two humans, a great blue blur, and smashed past both of them with his mighty Salamence wings extended. Arkeda and Saishi were unconscious in a second's time, and their bodies were thrown backwards out of the alley and onto the sidewalk outside of the Sylphs Corporation building. Wheeling around and rushing back with a clap of his wings, Bolt returned to his alley and snatched Kenta up in his teeth. Holding him by the back of his uniform, the Salamence hauled his wounded trainer onto his back, then took off once more. Hovering through the lower alleys of Saffron City at 80 miles an hour, Bolt finally increased altitude at city limits and soared eastward with the sun at his back. Both brothers sat for a moment in complete silence, their food finished along with Kenta's story. Hibiki tried to look down at the place on Kenta's stomach which had been penetrated by a bullet, but the table was blocking it from view. He looked up at his big brother, his awe renewed by all that Kenta had been through. How on earth did you survive? He asked in a hushed voice. After losing so much blood? Kenta shook his head very slightly, barely moving it from side to side. I don't know, he murmured quietly. It may have been raw willpower to live. The proper condition had been fulfilled. What condition? I was shot by the right person. Kenta narrowed his eyes. Arcada, my own chief. Hibiki heard a humming noise coming from the other side of the table, and Kenta looked down at his pocket. Phone's ringing, he said, pulling out the green cellular phone. Hibiki looked at it curiously. Hey, that's not your old phone, is it? Nope. Hello? Hey, it's me, came Curtis's voice in Kenta's ear. Could you come over here real quick? We've got a problem. Kenta's eyes widened. The Master Ball isn't giving you trouble, is it? No, it's not that, though. That was a surprise, said Curtis in a nervous voice. But we found out what the Master Ball's made of. Hurry over, okay? All right, but hold on. Kenta motioned to Hibiki to listen carefully, then enunciated his words very carefully into the speaker. From now on, don't give your secrets to anyone who doesn't enter your house with a password. We need to be secretive, or the lot of us will likely be hauled off to prison again, and this time it'll be much more serious. He heard Curtis gulp. If you say so. Why that password? Asked Hibiki, as he and Kenta left the restaurant and began their short walk down the freezing street towards Kurt's house. I mean, it's not like I don't like it, I'm just wondering. It's an antonym, said Kenta, already looking happier now that he was moving again. It symbolizes our cause, like a good password should. Tell me, Hibiki, who are we against? Hibiki thought for a moment. Silhouette? Not them, but you're close. Think bigger. G.R.I.P. Right! Kenta shot him a thumbs up and smiled. The Government Restrictive Institute on Pokemon. They were the forerunners of this whole mess to begin with, and it's in their name that the government has stolen our Pokemon away. His face darkened. How appropriate that the acronym spells out the status of Pokemon in Japan. They've got a death grip on every trainer in this country, and they're not letting go. They had reached Curtis's doorstep. Kenta raised his voice. That's why we demand a release! The sliding door panel opened, and Curtis poked his head out and looked at them. Welcome back, he said jubilantly, bidding them to come in with a swing of his hand. Thank you for getting Grandpa back. Maisie'll be so happy when I call her. Well, it's about time you showed some gratitude for that, said Kenta in a grumpy voice, crossing his arms. Hibiki looked at him in horror, and immediately his face cracked. Ha! Just kidding. How's Elder Kurt enjoying his freedom? Curtis poked a thumb at the workbench in the back of the room and smiled, rolling his eyes. Kenta shrugged, putting up his arms. Of course, he's not happy unless he's working on something. There's a good man. Yep. Curtis turned and waved Kurt over, grinning. Grandpa, take a break. He looked back at Kenta. Hey, do you have the time? Yeah, it's 2:25. Why? I reviewed the television guide earlier today. There's this thing that's airing once every 3 hours for the whole week, discussing how active Pokemon trainers are to train now. I figured you might want to take a look at it and see for yourself what G.R.I.P is expecting from Pokemon Japan. But before it comes on, Curtis lowered his voice. I've still got something to ask you. What's this I hear about you wanting Grandpa to make as many Master Balls as he possibly can? Hibiki looked at Kenta expectantly. He himself had already known from earlier in the morning that a plethora of Master Ball duplicates was part of Kenta's plan, but he'd been flabbergasted by the news when he'd first heard it. Kenta gave Hibiki a reassuring nod, and motioned to the floor mats around the traditional Japanese ground-level table. You guys may want to sit down. It took Kenta about half an hour to discuss his reasons for needing Kurt to make as many Master Balls as humanly possible. Curtis made a few astonished interjections at Kenta's daring, but Kurt retained a face of silent awe. When he'd finished, the two Pokeball makers gave each other a lasting look of silent agreement, then gave Kenta a firm nod. I'm in. My years are many, and I've seen mostly everything there is to see. What can they hope to do to me at this point in my life if they catch me? And if I'm caught, I can always flee to America. Joking! Joking!